Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Well, Tony, it's a Monday during football season, and that can only mean one thing here. It's Michigan Monday. We get to talk about the Wolverines, what we learned watching the previous weekend's game. I was looking forward to talking about the offense, the defense, and then late breaking news, I was just made aware via Jim Harbaugh's Monday press conference that, quote, there's no offense, there's no defense, there's a we-fence, Tony. So I hope you are able to kind of pivot from the notes that you've taken earlier and are prepared to talk about the we-fence.
A little. I think we also need to stop calling it the I formation. It is now the we formation. And any references... If you couldn't see, Tom was holding up four fingers as I wrote in Michigan Monday in honor of Jim Harbaugh's favorite order at Wendy's.
I'm just glad he's out of the Soviet gulag and back to practice on Monday. That's good. I'm sure that was quite a terrible self-imposed ordeal that he went through over the weekend. Boy, I can't, paroled for the week, but boy, back in the gulag this weekend with him.
Well, work release, it allows the person to get reacquainted with society and also be some good to society. But then, yes, cannot be in the stadium during the game. 2 more games for Jim Harbaugh to sit out. Michigan goes on with Jesse Minter, defensive coordinator, as the head coach this past week. They went 30-3 over East Carolina. A typical season opening win. Not pretty, not expected to be close, and was, neither one of those things. It was 23-0 at the half. It was Michigan suffocating a lesser program, lesser team, and just winning out comfortably in the end. And yet, Tom, if we wanted to pick some stuff apart, if we wanted to nitpick the Michigan Wolverines, it started out the very first drive for Michigan. Now, granted, they are pinned at their 2 from a tremendous punt, but they ran the ball 3 times, get no yards. I was disappointed on 3rd and 10. They ran the ball with Donovan Edwards rather than throw the ball from the end zone with JJ McCarthy. Show some faith in your quarterback that he can do this. But overall, just 122 yards rushing on 31 carries. Donovan Edwards was 12 of, I think, 30. Let me see here. 12 of 37. So 12 carries, 37 yards. Half of his carries went for 2 yards or less.
Yeah, they struggled running the ball in times when you wouldn't have necessarily expected them to struggle running the ball. Blake Corum had a couple nice long ones, but on the whole, there was a lot of. There was that first drive. I had that written down that three runs from your own 1 yard line. You're Michigan. They're East Carolina. 2-time defending Joe Moore award-winning offensive line, as you've probably heard once or twice over the last few months, and they couldn't run the ball at all against East Carolina. And then even at the end of the game, when they're up 30-0 or whatever, and they're very clearly just trying to get Donovan Edwards a touchdown, and they can't get Donovan Edwards a touchdown, and East Carolina jumps off sides at one point. They get an extra play, and they still can't get Donovan Edwards a touchdown, and then they end up, McCarthy fumbles a snap on 4th down, I think. And it was one of those things where, this is all nitpicking because, we can clap like seals and say, oh, what wonderful boys you were. Congratulations on, scoring a couple touchdowns against East Carolina. The first month of the season is an enormous waste of time for Michigan. So you're kind of just looking for, okay, where do they have to improve before they play a game that actually matters? Yeah, it's a little bit of an overhauled offensive line. I think that's just something, this is like the dentist. He's not, we don't need to do a filling today, but it's just like, there's something in this one we're going to keep an eye on kind of thing. That feels like, oh yeah, well, we'll kind of keep an eye on it with Michigan in short yardage, because that's one that they should be able to do more than they did, I think, at times on Saturday.
And they'd also struggled to do it with an extra offensive tackle that they would bring in. Trente Jones would be their 6th lineman that they would bring in, and it didn't necessarily work as much as they thought they would. So this past week, it was Carson Barnhart at left tackle, Miles Hinton at right tackle. Next week, it's going to be two different guys, apparently, according to Harbaugh, if he's following through with the plan that he talked about last week. I'm not sure what he said on Monday. So, as we talked about in last week's show about how this Michigan offensive line still isn't quite settled, and there are some Michigan fans who are like, how dare you compare the Michigan offensive line to Ohio State's offensive line? Haven't you heard about the 2 Joe Moore awards that, not this offensive line. They don't have it. It's last year's offensive line and the offensive line before that has it. This offensive line is still a work in progress, and I think we saw that throughout the day on Saturday. I want to talk about JJ McCarthy, Tom, because he was really, really good, and he was 26 of 30 for 280 yards, 3 touchdowns, only a long completion of 24, ran once. It was a loss of 2. I think that was probably the fumble at the towards the end of the game. And again, not great that he's still having ball control issues in bad spots. That one being at the East Carolina 2, but was on point all day long. Only had I think he had a couple of drops or balls went off of receivers' hands. He could have probably been 28 of 30, and his receivers were open almost all day. He had a couple of tight throws in there. I think one of the touchdowns to Roman Wilson, one of the 3 touchdowns to Roman Wilson, there was nice coverage there. But that dude, he looks completely comfortable. He's running around. He can rush some things that he wants to, or he can just hang back. And like everything happens on his time and his terms. And he was pretty much toying with East Carolina in this one.
Yeah, he looks very good when he's thrown to open receivers, and they had a bunch of open receivers throughout the course of the game, including a couple of touchdowns. That 3rd touchdown to Roman Wilson, the last one that made it 30-0, that was a ball into a tight window. That was a great throw. And he had a couple. He was through downfield more than I think we saw typically last year. They did a lot of 10-yard passing, 10 yards downfield kind of passing, 15 yards downfield kind of passing. He went downfield a little more than that a few times on Saturday. I think that's just reflective of he knows the system. He knows what he's doing. He's got the reps now where he feels confident. He is extending plays with his legs. And he had the first 2 touchdowns, I think, both of them were on plays where he extended the play with his legs, bought some time, maybe crossed the line of scrimmage at least once, but bought some time, extended the plays, let his receivers get open, and then made the easy throw to the open receiver. He was very, very good. There was one downfield, I think the pass interference downfield kind of early where the ball looked like it kind of fluttered on him a little bit going downfield, but again, you're really kind of nitpicking at this point. The only thing that I thought was not a great decision was he got targeted late in the 3rd quarter. It was like 30-0, and it was like, why do you still have him in the game, and why is he doing anything to take a risk when it's 30-0 in the 3rd quarter? You should probably not have him, because it feels like, no disrespect to Davis Warren, but I think there's a pretty big drop off from JJ McCarthy to Davis Warren. I would be pretty careful. I think they were being selective about not having him run and not putting him at risk in a game where there was no real risk. I think you probably want to be careful with him, because if he was so impressive that if he gets hurt, I think that's a big problem for Michigan, and they need to take that into account.
Yeah, for sure. And the first touchdown pass was the one that was over the line of scrimmage, and so they reviewed it, and basically the only thing that may not have been over the line of scrimmage was his back heel as he was throwing the ball. And your entire body, everything about the body and the ball has to be past the line of scrimmage. So the call stood. As I wrote in Michigan Monday, Tom, that play was in honor of Jim Harbaugh because McCarthy also crossed the line and claimed he didn't do anything wrong.
It was, another great example for Michigan fans of sometimes when the camera angle's not straight down the line, the yard line, that sometimes it can be hard to determine whether someone is all the way across the line or not. Can't think of any other examples of that, though, in school history, so let's just move on. Yeah, there's some early stuff where it felt like they were in third and long a lot, especially early. Like there was just, I think the first 3 times they got the ball, they were immediately in like 3rd and 7 or longer. And that's, this is going to be a lot of the same disclaimers that we had on the Ohio State game also apply to the Michigan game, where there was a bunch of stuff that looked a little raggedy kind of at the beginning of the game. It's week 1. That's what it looks like in week 1. You're breaking in some new players. You're, trying some new stuff. Your head coach is sitting at home, drinking a gallon of milk somberly on the couch. I mean, it's week 1. That's what week 1 looks like. That's what week 1 is for. Michigan has, 3 week 1s coming up. So, they've got some time to work all this stuff out. But it was, overall, it felt like that was, for the Michigan offense, there's a lot of stuff you can kind of go, but that wasn't great, or you would like to see more of this or that. But overall, I feel like that was a pretty good game for the Wee-fence when they had the ball.
Jim Harbaugh watching at home with the milk in one hand and a steak in the other. That's tremendous calcium and protein right there. The running game, 122 yards. As I wrote in Michigan Monday, I expect that to be like 250 next week. I'm not ready to judge anything just yet on one game, although I think we did say the only thing that would move us in terms of what happens at East Carolina is if they struggle running the ball. Like, that would be the only area that you struggle to do something rather than you being able to do something, because you should be able to do whatever you want in a sense in this game. And it was a little bit more difficult to run than it should have been, but we know that the running backs are very good. And we assume that the interior should be good. I thought it should have been better than it was on Saturday, but first game, I mean, all of the mixing and matching that is going on the offensive line, I'm sure it doesn't help. And of course, we all know you need weeks and weeks to gel, that sort of thing that we always talk about with the offensive line. So it is what it is at this point. It's only going to get better. It's not like I don't think they came out fantastic last year against maybe Hawaii on the ground, Colorado State on the ground. May have been a little bit difficult initially if I think back to last year. Actually, I got it right here. So last year, Colorado State, 40 for 235. Not too bad, I guess. But overall, like, it's you're not going to get worked up about a struggle offensively. You get worked up about being shut down, and they weren't shut down.
No, they definitely weren't shut down, and they moved the ball fine, and there's little spots where it didn't work, the goal line stand and the thing at the beginning of the game, and okay, that's fine. It's not you're not going to do the Oregon Portland State thing where you just score touchdowns on your first 11 possessions or whatever it was. Like, it's fine. You have plenty of time to work the kinks out. This is almost like spring training for Michigan, where you're going to play your starters for a while, and then you're going to then you put the backups in, and you're not super worried about all the fine details of winning the game. It's just kind of you're working some stuff out. One thing that I thought was really interesting, this was kind of like a microcosm, I felt like, of JJ McCarthy's mentality on the day. There was that play where it was, I think, a 3rd down, and they had the ball just in the plus side of the 50, and McCarthy had the ball, and there was a little bit of pressure, and it looked like his primary receiver was covered downfield. And he just kind of did like one of those like Patrick Mahomes, like off platform, just kind of like almost like shot put it out to Blake Corum. And Blake Corum's just like wide open. He catches it and he picks up the first down. And it was just like, this is a guy who feels extremely confident. He's not looking over his shoulder in terms of like, is someone going to take my job? He's not thinking, I wonder what the right play is. I wonder if I can do this. It was just kind of, it was very improvised. But it was just felt to me like a microcosm of a guy who's been in the system now for 3 years. This is his 3rd year, and just feels really comfortable with it, and feels like, okay, I've got this. I'll make it work. Like, we'll figure it out. It's it's the kind of stuff that I'll say to my wife and drives her crazy when it's like, okay, well, what time are we going to go to dinner? Like, I don't know. Like, whatever. We'll figure it out. Where do we want to go? I don't know. I mean, we'll figure it out. We'll get there. We have not yet once, failed to find a place to eat dinner and starve to death. Like, that has not yet happened once. And that was kind of JJ McCarthy, like, this is kind of a weird situation. I don't know what to do. Like, I'll figure it out. Okay, like, I'll just sort of shot put it over to Blake Corum. That's fine.
Yeah, he's completely comfortable in any kind of situation and will get out of any type of pass rush. And as I think I jotted down a note, it was like watching an and one dude take on a seventh grader in a one-on-one contest, just, making somebody look foolish. And that's what he's doing out there. Defensively, so Michigan holds, obviously, East Carolina to 3 points. The Pirates rush for 103 yards on 26 attempts. That's 4 yards a carry. Not fantastic. Long of just 16 yards, which he'll generally take. 17 of 29 passing between two quarterbacks for 132 yards. Long play there of 19 yards. So just a long play from scrimmage given up of 19 yards. You'll take that as often as you can get it. Overall, Michigan was without starting cornerback Will Johnson, starting safety Rod Moore. If you didn't know they were out, you wouldn't have noticed that they were out. And Keon Sabb, former top 100 safety, sophomore guy, maybe a redshirt freshman. I'm not sure if he played last year much, but the second-year guy who stepped in and did fine. And then Keyshawn Harris and the UMass transfer Josh Wallace were the two starting corners. And I thought they did okay and Josh Wallace had a fantastic interception that was taken away because the receiver stepped out of bounds before he was able to catch a little bobbling pass there on the sideline. But I thought overall they weren't tested through the air, but Will Johnson and Rod Moore weren't necessarily missed. They will eventually be if they don't come back soon, and they both might be back next week. But you didn't notice any drop-off where East Carolina wasn't able to take advantage of any drop-off.
Yeah, and this is a little bit like the Ohio State-Indiana game where the Ohio State secondary looked really good, and it was like, well, yeah, but Indiana didn't really try to do that much and didn't really have the personnel to do that much, so you looked kind of like what you should look like in that kind of scenario. And it's sort of, my conclusion on the Michigan secondary was essentially what my conclusion on the Ohio State secondary was. And that was just basically, yeah, you did what you're supposed to do. If you look bad against a team like that, that tells me something. If you look good against a team like that, yeah, let's see it again next week. It's, you're probably fine, but it doesn't really tell me all that much that you shut down East Carolina. There was that one drive late in the second quarter where they had a couple times when they had East Carolina in third down and just missed tackles, and they gave up a couple first downs, and then that was the drive that ended on there was the pass completion on the sideline that ended up being incomplete. They reviewed that, but they somehow missed that Michigan had too many guys on the field. That Mike Tirico pointed out live. The rules expert came on and said, yeah, they should catch that, and then they didn't catch that. So, Michigan caught a little bit of a break there just to at least have, maintain the shutout throughout the half. And, but it was a solid performance. There was, outside of a few plays like that, there was really nothing that was particularly jarring. It was just, it looked so much like these preseason Michigan games always do, where the opposing team has like one drive, they're playing some overmatched directional Michigan or, UConn or whoever, and the other team has one drive where they go down the field and, maybe they kick a field goal, maybe they don't, who knows. But it just the rest of the time they just look completely overmatched. That's just like, we've been doing this show long enough that it's like, oh, I've seen this one already. And yeah, it was fine. The one thing that really jumped out to me on defense for Michigan was the Mike Sainristil. He undercut the out route at one point and picked it off. But that play was really made by Kenneth Grant. He was the one who was right in the quarterback's face, because if the quarterback had gotten his feet under him and actually really driven the ball down the field a little bit, there was possibly something there, but Grant got in his face. He didn't didn't really get his legs into the throw and just kind of floated it out there, and Sainristil picked it off. But that's a guy who was not necessarily projected as a starter for Michigan, but someone who's making a big play in the middle of the defensive line. And that's a name that Ohio State fans may remember. He was someone who was sort of in the mix as a plan B for Ohio State in one of the classes a few years ago, and then never ended up getting an offer, I don't think. And so but he's turned into a useful player in the middle of that Michigan defensive line.
Yeah, and he's their biggest guy on the defensive line, and I think that was probably their most disruptive play from the defensive line on the afternoon, honestly, because that was really the only flash play that I wrote down. Although I will say the Josiah Stewart, the transfer edge rusher from Coastal Carolina, who looks like a linebacker because he's 6'1", 237 pounds. He was really, really quick, I thought, a couple of times, and was able to just, rather than take on a blocker, he'll just go like, no, I'm just going to go around you. I'm going to step to the side. I've never seen a pass rusher jump cut before, but he's kind of like that. So there was some, I kind of expected more dominance from the Michigan defensive line. I don't think we saw that. Not that, again, they weren't getting run on or anything. 4 yards carry is what it is, but I was expecting a few more plays, but that will probably happen. I thought the linebackers and Junior Colson, Mike Barrett start, and then Ernest Hausman, the sophomore transfer from Nebraska, comes in, and those three would just rotate throughout the game. And Hausman led the team with 6 tackles, but Colson and Barrett both had 5. I thought they were pretty solid. Keon Sabb with 5 tackles, as we mentioned, he was hitting some people. I think the biggest hitter might be the other safety, Makari Page. Like, he was laying some wood a couple of times. So you notice some of these guys, and I'll be interested to see how they all come together and how much more they can build that depth. And when Rod Moore comes back, is Keon Sabb going to play more? What happens there? The cornerback issue I want to go back to, because they started, like I said, Josh Wallace from UMass and Keyshawn Harris, a senior who walked on back in 2019. So when you're down to your starting, you're missing a starter in Will Johnson, but your other 2 starters this week are a transfer and a walk-on from 2019. Like, that's a damning statement about your cornerback recruiting over the years. The fact that, 1, it's been, the room is so thin, and 2, there's nobody else to step up. And if they didn't have Wallace, they would have had, I don't know, they obviously have some other guys, but when these are your best options right now, and no offense to a walk on, and we've seen Antonio Smith back at Ohio State in 2006 was a semifinalist for the defensive back award, and that was the same secondary with Malcolm Jenkins. So I'm not saying anything is walk on can't do these things, but they shouldn't be at the top of the list when it comes to one guy being removed. And so that's where, especially a room like corner, where you recruit a bunch every year because you need a bunch. So I think that might be something to watch and something to see how they play when they're getting tested, and how much the other guy plays once Will Johnson comes back.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting question, because Will Johnson has the 5-star pedigree, was an immediate impact player as a true freshman, and is, should be on that Thorpe Award list this year. Behind him, though, guys get hurt sometimes. Like, that is a thing that happens in football. And if you are down to UMass transfer and former walk-on, sometimes those guys, sometimes you have a JJ Watt who starts his career at a smaller school and then turns into and sometimes you have an Antonio Smith. I don't think you want to bet on that too consistently. I mean, that's a thing that can happen, but you don't, you want that guy to be your 4th or your 5th corner where, boy, if everything goes wrong, we have this guy and we feel okay about him, but you don't want to necessarily have him be the next guy up. You're going to play teams that can throw the ball better than ECU later this year. You're playing Michigan's schedule against the Big Ten East this year, so there's not going to be many of them. You're not maybe going to play them until mid-November or so, when you get to the Penn State, Maryland, Ohio State stretch. But that's the time of year when you do have guys banged up, and you'll probably get through the Rutgers game fine, and you'll get through the Bowling Green game fine, and that'll be fine no matter what. But that's just another something to keep an eye on, because the margin for error at the top of the Big Ten East this year is pretty thin. And, you've got Michigan's going to have the trip to Penn State, then they've got Maryland, then they've got Ohio State. Those are 3 teams that I think are going to be pretty decent opponents back to back to back at a time of year when you do tend to have guys banged up. I mean, how many Ohio State cornerbacks were banged up at various points last year? It feels like Ohio State got down to about 5th or 6th on the depth chart. If that's where you are in week 1 already, I think it's worth at least kind of keeping an eye on as a possible point of concern.
Michigan starts two new kicking specialists. Punter James Turner from Louisville, where he was 20 of 22 last year. He kicked there for 4 years. He was their starting place kicker on placements for 3 years, and I think is like 47 of 57 in his career or something, somewhere around there. And then Tommy Doman's their new punter, and also the kickoff guy. Doman had a 44-yarder and a 45-yard punt. Back to Turner, though, he missed an extra point, missed a 50-yard field goal, hooked it left at the end of the half, hooked both of his misses to the left. So that's just, he missed 2 field goals last year, is already 1 for 2 this year, and I think he missed 2 extra points last year, and obviously now has missed 1. So that's where they are there. Nothing, Tom, to speak of really in the return game either. You've got a current or former walk-on as your punt returner now. So again, there's another instance where should you be down that low on the depth chart, or is this obviously is an instance where, yeah, we like this guy. Obviously they do. But as I think I said this to you yesterday or the day before, like Michigan has like 86 letterman returning, just to give you an idea of how often they play their walk-ons. And this is another instance. Jake Thaw, I think an upperclassman who, like I said, is either a current walk-on or former walk-on. You never know when guys get scholarships at this point. But any thoughts there with the special teams? Anything that moves you there?
Yeah, I thought that James Turner's day was just a fascinating emotional roller coaster where he comes in and misses an extra point. Do you know the last time Ohio State missed an extra point?
Ohio State?
Ohio State.
I do not.
It was shockingly recent. I have no recollection of this whatsoever, but they missed one against Maryland last year. So, like 3 games ago, they missed an extra point. I have no recollection of that.
All the time.
But before that, they had one where a walk-on, Dominic DiMaccio, missed one in 2019, and before that, they missed one in 2016. Tyler Durbin missed a couple back in 2016. So, as far as scholarship kickers at Ohio State, they've missed 1 in the last 6 seasons. So, that shouldn't happen, and you kind of are willing to write it off. Okay, first game, whatever. He had one of the other extra points was a little like it. One of them was down the middle, and one of them was kind of another little bit of a hook job. And then he comes in and hits a 50-yarder and matches his career long. And he's, he didn't try a 50-yarder last year. He was 0 for 3 on 50-plus yarders the year before that. So it was like, okay, wow, this, maybe he's got more of a leg than you think. And then just absolutely duck hooks a 52-yarder later in the game. So, the leg is there to do it, because the one from 50 that he made, it hit the net like halfway up. It was a bomb, and it was straight down the middle. So, it's no disrespect to Louisville, but playing at Michigan's a little different than playing at Louisville. So maybe it's a little bit of a new game, new situation kind of thing where you're just a little concerned or a little off. It's just worth keeping an eye on, because it is going to be a while before Michigan plays a game that could come down to a kick. But if you've got a guy who is just, a little inconsistent, worth keeping an eye on. I just pulled up his yearly stats: 13 of 15 on field goals as a freshman, 14 for 22 as a sophomore, 20 for 22 as a junior, and then 1 of 2 this year. He's, essentially perfect from 20 to 29. He is perfect 30 to 39. Anything outside of 40, though, he is, 9 of 15 the last 2 years, and now 1 for 5, 50 plus. So anything outside of 40 is, a little bit of a concern with him. That's just one of those things to keep an eye on. One of those things that I'm sure Michigan will adjust what they're doing. If they're not confident in him from 40 yards and out, that probably changes how you're calling plays and what, your sort of your decision tree when you get into that part of the field.
Yeah, the one he made was emphatic. The one he missed was reminiscent of Ohio State's 50-yard attempt against Georgia last year that just never had a chance. Tom, the last thing for me is the clock rule. I wonder how much this is going to impact Michigan, because they had 9 possessions in this game, and in their 3 non-conference games last year, It was 10 possessions, 14 possessions, 13 possessions, and they had 7 possessions in the first half in the first game last year, and then 8 and 8. So 8 possessions generally in each of the first halves last year. They had 9 total possessions in this game, 5 in the first half. My wondering is Michigan gets better, their running game gets better the longer the game goes on. If you shorten the game against them, their running game, it becomes less effective because they're not able to wear on you as much. They don't have as many possessions. They don't have as many drives. You're not facing the brunt of it as much as you are. And the play numbers aren't all that different, but you look at the number of drives, I just wonder how this is going to impact them because, and I wrote about this in Michigan Monday, the first, if we just say 9 drives is the norm of what we'll see from Michigan this year, the first 9 drives against Ohio State last year, Michigan rushed for 35 yards on 15 carries. Everything after that, 20 for 217. So if there is no 10th drive and beyond, then how effective will this Michigan offensive line, this Michigan running game get in the fourth quarter? The fourth quarter was their best rushing quarter last year for many of these same reasons. They rushed for the most yards, averaged 5.9 yards per carry, 15 touchdowns in the fourth quarter was more than any other quarter last year. I wonder if how this is going to hamper their effectiveness this season.
That's a really interesting question about them in particular. I think broadly speaking, it's going to be that's going to favor the underdogs. That's something that, when you were playing a player who was better than you at NCAA 2014, what did you do? You'd run the play clock down to 1 every snap and shorten the game and don't give them any opportunities. You hold the score down by not letting the other team have opportunities. Indiana did that to Ohio State. Indiana just ran the ball and ran the ball and ran the ball and ran the ball. And, the second quarter during that game on Saturday, I looked up and expected to see 10 minutes left on the clock in the second quarter, and it was like 5.5. And it was like, what? What? Did I black out? What happened? But that shortens the number of possessions because it's the same philosophy that goes with end of game decisions, or, if you're the underdog and you score a touchdown and you're down by 1, you go for 2 because the odds of you getting lucky and having, landing that one knockout punch on the one play is better than taking your chances in overtime where you're just taking turns again. And if you're the favorite, you want to extend the game and just keep, you have a slight advantage in every play. So the more plays that pile up, the more that's probably going to accumulate. It feels like this is going to be a year where somebody gets bit by just not having enough plays. And, if you had 2 more drives in this game, the better team would have won, but it's short. And you're going to have teams maybe grinding it out. And it's so interesting because you're setting yourself up for a return to, the old, I formation football, grounded out kind of, move the clock kind of thing. If Michigan is under pressure here, I guess they're more comfortable with the pass right now with JJ McCarthy than they probably have been in the past. So do they get a little pass happy? Generally, the Jim Harbaugh offense, the criticism has been like they're a little too ground and pound sometimes. Now, if they're seeing that thing with the clock moving and the game being shortened, do they try and push and press a little bit more and try and hit some bigger plays in the passing game? I wonder if that changes their philosophy on offense a little bit moving forward.
I think you're going to see teams chasing plays and then suffering because of it. I think there's going to be the opposite effect having where you're going out 3 and out even quicker than maybe you normally would because you're chasing stuff. But I think you have to be aggressive, and almost everybody's going to want to shorten the game against Michigan. And Michigan will allow that because that fits what Jim Harbaugh is okay doing. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if there are games where Michigan maybe has like 7 or 8 possessions, and that limits incredibly the amount of points you can score. And so how will Michigan adapt to that? I think everybody's kind of trying to figure that out right now. And it's week 1, it's 1 week. We're probably, I think a lot of us are making more about this clock rule than maybe we are overreacting, but the numbers right now aren't. There are some questionable numbers when it comes to just drives and plays and things like that. So we'll see. For Ohio State, they averaged like 67.8 plays on offense in September last year. They had 67 this week. So, it's not impacting things necessarily like that, but the possessions just seem to be down. So, Tom, anything else before we get out of here?
Nope. We'll have plenty of time to talk about all of this stuff again next week when Michigan plays another team that they really probably should not be wasting anyone's time with. Can't wait.
That's right. Michigan will be taking on UNLV, who is coming into that game off of a big 44-14 win over Bryant. Bryant, Tom, the mascot for Bryant would be?
The Gumballs.
Destroyed the Gumballs. And so now they will see what they can do against the Wolverines. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. As always, check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member. Check us out on the message board there. All kinds of team intel, recruiting insights, interviews, things like that. I encourage you to join. Also find us at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle, Facebook.com/BuckeyeHuddle as well. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.